Okay. I'd like to call this meeting to order. This is a meeting scheduled for April, right? For June 8th, 2010. Madam Clerk, please do the roll call.
Ms. Drummond.
Present.
Mr. Birch.
Here.
Ms. Gray Jackson is excused at the National League of Cities. Ms. Johnston. Here. Mr. Trainee.
Here.
Mr. Flynn.
He's here.
Mr. Flynn was here.
He's here.
Okay. Mr. Starr.
Here.
Mr. Hall.
Here.
Mr. Honeman.
Here.
Mr. Gutierrez.
Here.
Ms. Osiander. Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Before we begin, you may notice the screens are not working. Apparently they're down, so we'll be doing voice vote on everything tonight. Is that right, Madam Clerk?
Yes.
Okay. Just the public know. Pledge of Allegiance. Ernie, would you lead us in pledge, please? Thank you, Ernie. Next item of business is minutes of previous meetings. We have the meeting, item 4A. It's the minutes meeting of April 13th, 2010.
Second.
April 13th, 2010. Motion was made and a second to approve that. Is there any objection to approval of those minutes? Ask unanimous consent. Seeing no objection, those minutes are approved, Madam Clerk. Next one is regular meeting.
Move to approve April 20th.
Working on it. There.
Yeah.
Okay, we had a motion to approve the meeting of April 20th, 2010. Moved and seconded. Ask unanimous consent. Is there any objection to approval of those minutes? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, those minutes are approved.
Move to approve April 27th.
Moved and seconded. My screen is getting to be fun. Moved and seconded to approve the minutes of April 27th, 2010. Moved and seconded. Is there any objection to approval of those items? Those minutes, seeing no objection, those minutes are approved as read. Next item in front of us. I don't know if yours is working any better than mine is.
Second.
Been moved and seconded for approval of the minutes of May 25th. Is there any objection to approval of those minutes? Seeing none, those minutes are approved as submitted to us. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Just a slight technicality. Mr. Hahnemann seconded the approval of the minutes for April 13th, and he
was not on the assembly at
Yes.
that time, and I was not on the assembly. So please let the minutes reflect we did not join with that because we were not on the body. It's kind of hard for us to approve when we weren't here. Thank you, ma'am.
Will do.
I approve the technical. Thank you. Appreciate you keeping us straight. Okay. Ms. Osiander?
Could also I be reflected as not being present for the May 25th, so therefore not voting on that one?
Madam Clerk?
Yes.
Thank
You will
you.
be.
Okay, thank you. Next item of business is Mayor's report. Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, since we last met, a number of things of interest to us have happened. First and foremost, of course, the governor's vetoes were announced, and Anchorage certainly had any number of projects that didn't make the final cut, but at the same time, we're very pleased that certainly some of our bigger ticket items like the $20 million for the port expansion, the fire department, 2 fire stations, one rebuild and one the renovation, both stayed in, numerous road projects, and numerous grants to the Parks Foundation so that we can do quite a bit of work this year and next year on park projects. So overall, we're pleased. Certainly we didn't get everything we asked for in our package. It was an ambitious package, and we'll look forward to trying again next year as some of the ones that didn't make it this year rise to the top. Over the weekend, I want to thank everyone who was involved in the first annual Festival of Flowers. We wanted to for the first time, really take an asset of the city that's been acknowledged and, just clearly one of the things that both visitors and residents alike marvel at every year, and see if we can't turn it into an annual celebration. And the kickoff celebration was tremendous. Great support from the private sector as well as volunteers, and so hopefully every year it'll grow bigger and better. And the goal is to hopefully get more private sector involvement as we look at budget challenges, and again, off to a good start there. Yesterday was the military appreciation lunch put on by the Chamber of Commerce. City Manager George Vikalis was the master of ceremonies for the event, and there's more events throughout the week, including the joint military picnic on Friday. So if any members can attend that, any participation by the city is greatly appreciated. Yesterday was the second cruise ship of our 10 cruise ships coming. They're coming every other Monday, so there'll be 8 more. And I've talked to any number of merchants downtown over the course of the last several weeks, and they've definitely seen the impact of having 1,000-plus people in downtown Anchorage. So that's been a good success. Finally, Mr. Chairman, something we don't normally do, but I laid a resolution on the table tonight for the consideration of the body. It is unnumbered, and it will speak to voting in favor of Alaska's congressional delegation supporting Lisa Murkowski's Joint Resolution 26 regarding EPA regulations of through the Clean Air Act. And so there is a set of documents that support the resolution, including numerous letters from other entities that have supported her resolution as well. So we're laying that on the table tonight. We'll make the motion at the appropriate time, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Anybody wish to discuss anything with the mayor? Not seeing anything. We'll move on now to Mr. Flynn, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Mayor, don't need an answer tonight, but you may be aware we've received some correspondence from folks concerned about apparently a new contractual arrangement regarding the Sullivan Arena with the Alaska Aces and how it somehow affects other productions taking place there. We'll want to follow up with the administration on that and get some more information about the nature of that contract and how it might affect other events taking place at that venue.
We'd be glad to do that.
Thank you.
We can either respond, to email to everybody, or just
Yeah, well, certainly an email, and then maybe we'll see if we need to have a work session or not.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from assembly members? I don't seem to be any. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Next item in business is Assembly Chair's report. Just that we do have the offices now open on the first floor. We moved into it. There are 3 offices there. So if you want to use them, please come in and use them to meet with your constituents. And we have a room there for the committees to meet. We got a little round table there so you can meet with your committees. So if you have any questions, please get a hold of me, but it's some place we can use to meet with people in committee meetings. Appreciate the administration's support on that. Next we go down to committee reports. Harriet?
No report, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Birch?
Mr. Hall and I attended, as well as Ms. Johnston, the board meeting, biweekly board meeting of the Anchorage Chamber of Commerce last Friday. Had a pretty good discussion on a number of issues, but a couple of presentations on a matter that we had considered and approved unanimously at the last meeting. And that would be the resolution that basically addresses the so-called anti-corruption, let's see, what is it, the so-called anti-corruption initiative. And I did note and appreciate the copy of the resolution that came from the school district that was approved by the school district this earlier, I think it was, I don't know, was it last night? It must have been last night. In any case, that was a subject of discussion at the Chamber Board, and they are going to be deliberating on that, and we're hopeful that we'll see them consider a similar resolution at the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Johnston?
No report, thank you.
Thank you. I want to note, too, that we've got Faye Von Gimmigan, former chairman, in our audience. It's nice to see you again, Faye. Mr. Flynn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just real briefly, Thursday, 10 a.m., we'll have our next Port Committee meeting. We'll be in room 55 at City Hall. We'll be hearing from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers regarding dredging matters in Upper Cook Inlet. And that's all, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Starr.
You call me?
I was going to, but
Thank
go
you.
ahead.
It's fine. Budget and Finance meeting June 17th, just to start fleshing out some budget challenges we've got coming up and process for evaluating the school district's budgets as well. So preliminary dialogue on that.
Good. Mr. Hall?
No report.
Mr. Honeman?
Mr. Chairman, we had the Public Safety Committee meeting a bit early this month, June, I believe, 3rd last week, and happy to report we had 7 Assembly members, yourself included, attending. The main theme and concern of the meeting was to address strategies of the police department and the administration for addressing some increased violence within the community. We had a shooting at Valley Moon Park, seriously wounding a gentleman, a father at Valley Moon Park on Memorial Day, and also a homicide in Mountain View as well the previous day. So there's been 9 homicides in Anchorage to date, actually 11 total, but it'll be removed, 2 from officer-involved shootings, so 9, and we're a little concerned about perhaps there's some strategies there weren't none. But happy to report that the good news is that the administration, through the chief, reported that they're going to look at using the school resource officers again downtown square and the bike trails, as well as some what they call zero tolerance possibility this summer, using some overtime. And the chief expressed that he would be monitoring the overtime costs very closely. So there are some good news to report there. And I did notice today at least 2 persons, a dispatcher and an officer, is resigning in the near future, and I've heard word of another officer as well. So we're going to be declining. We're going to see some numbers, again, declining in the police department's ranked sworn positions, and it is troubling, and we're hoping that we can see if we can address that in the near future as well.
Thank you, Mr.
Next scheduled meeting, by the way, is July 14th, second Wednesday of July, and I think we moved that to 4 p.m. to accommodate Mr. Birch. He said afternoon meetings would be better for him.
We can be doing that in our conference room in the small
conference room, yes, sir.
Okay, thank you, sir. Mr. Gutierrez?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not a committee report per se, but very quickly, to refresh members of the body's memory, we looked at an ordinance earlier in the year regarding 100% ID check for alcohol sales at package stores, and the decision that the body made was to go forward with a voluntary program that the industry worked very hard to put together. We are about 90 days into that, and I am very sorry to report to you that it has officially failed. I got a call last week from officials at Brown Jug who said that, and I'd heard anecdotally that several of their larger competitors had decided on their own to go back on their word, stop carding folks, and they felt like they could not keep themselves at a competitive disadvantage, and I don't disagree with them at all on that issue. They did the very best they could. They worked very hard along with people from CHAR to put the voluntary program together, but it didn't quite last 90 days, so it has failed. As I mentioned to the body the night that we went forward with this program, that if it failed, there was a group of concerned citizens and a coalition to put together a ballot proposition for the municipal election that would make this a matter of law, and so that is the direction that group is moving. They're moving forward with a ballot proposition on this so that hopefully we can catch more of those folks with the restricted ID that says they're not allowed to buy alcohol. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Osiander?
Title 21 is now meeting every other Thursday instead of every Thursday. Our next meeting is June 17th, 9:30 to 11:30, Planning Department Conference Room. The topic will be large non-residential use in rural residential neighborhoods, plus new standards for tall buildings, over 7-story buildings. And then after that, we'll move into the definitions, and then we will probably finish up with snow storage. We had some unresolved issues in July. The big thing we're considering with snow storage requirements is to prohibit the use of salt on, for people to spread on their parking lots and private driveways. So if anybody's interested in those topics, they may want to attend a Title 21 meeting.
You might want to get some of the big companies, too, for example, like Home Depot and Lowe's, that sell, if they sell salt there for people to use in their driveways, if that ends up being adopted, it would be good to bring that element in to discuss it,
Thank you, sir.
if you would, ma'am. Thank you. Moving on the agenda, the next item is addendum to the agenda. If I get a motion to incorporate.
Second.
Thank you. I'll go through it. Item 9B6 is Resolution AR 2010-174, a resolution of the Municipality of Anchorage adopting revisions to the Anchorage Carbon Monoxide Maintenance Plan that delete the commitment to IM as a primary control measure. Health and Human Services, there's a semi-memorandum attached, AM 352-2010. Item 9B7, Resolution AR 2010-175, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly honoring Thelma G. Buckold and requesting a citizen naming panel from Assembly-Member Drummond. Dropping down to bid awards, item 9C3, Assembly Memorandum AM 353-2010, recommendation of award to Granite Construction Company for a Claret at C Street intersection safety improvements to the Municipality of Anchorage Project Management and Engineering Department. That is $2,372,448.75. The next one is item 9C4, same memorandum AM 354-2010, recommendation of award to Seacoast Construction Company Incorporated for 2010-2011 miscellaneous construction services for the Municipality of Anchorage Project Management and Engineering Department. That is $1,500,000. Item 9C5 is same memorandum AM 355-2010, recommendation of award to Roger Hickle Contracting Incorporated for MLNP Building 1120 upgrades for the Municipality of Anchorage Project Management and Engineering Department. That's $821,000. Next item is 9C6, same memorandum AM 358-2010, recommendation of award to Alaska Interstate Construction, LLC, for 72nd Avenue Meadow Street upgrades to the Municipality of Anchorage Project Management Engineering Department, and that price is $6,558,298.24. Under 9D, new business, 9D16, Assembly Memorandum AM 356-2010, proprietary purchase of computer software maintenance and hosting services from SIRE Technologies for the Municipality of Anchorage Information Technology Department, $36,817.20. Excuse me, what? $31,817.20. Next one is item 9D17, Assembly Memorandum AM 357-2010, recommendation of award various carriers providing property and excess insurance coverage to the Municipality of Anchorage. Risk Management Division, $1,195,272. Under ordinances and resolutions for introduction, there is 9F6, Ordinance AO 2010-49, an ordinance authorizing disposal of municipal land to the State of Alaska Department of Transportation and Public Facilities, transfer of .puff lands to Merrifield Airport, appropriating $2,282,300 to the Anchorage Fire Department Capital Improvement Fund, 431, $770,000 to the Parks and Recreation Department Capital Improvement Fund, 461, $4,500,000 to Merrifield Airport Capital Improvement Fund, 581, from AKDOT.puff to provide right-of-way for the Glen Highway reconstruction project. Public hearing requested on that is 6/22/2010. And there's also an Assembly Memorandum AM 351-2010. Yes.
Chairman, I'd also like to include in my motion the two items laid on the table. One is AR 2010-176 and AR 2010-177, both resolutions.
Second.
That's all I've got.
The first one is item 9B8, It's AR 2010-176, resolution appropriating $25,000 as a donation from the Rasmussen Foundation, $5,000 as a donation from North Rim Bank, and $25,000 as a contribution from the Municipality of Anchorage Certificate of Participation Debt Service Fund 719 to the Office of Mayor, Miscellaneous Grants Fund 261, to be used for community budget discussions. The next one is item 9B9. Looks like this is an unnumbered resolution. Okay. A resolution that the Anchorage Assembly encourages all members of Alaska's congressional delegation to support and vote in favor of SJ Resolution 26. Is there anything else that needs added to the addendum to the agenda? Yes, Ms. Osiander.
I just wanted to clarify, this B8 that was just added seems essentially the same as the B5 AR-173 we already have on the agenda.
Funding source is different.
I'll help you out when we get to it.
Okay, so, okay, we'll pull that one.
That's the difference in it, so we need to have it on there. Is there any objection to the addendum to the agenda? See no objection. The addendum to the agenda has been incorporated into the regular agenda. We now have in front of us the consent agenda. I need a motion on the consent agenda.
Move. Second.
Now we'll go to same members that want to pull it for further discussion. Ms. Osiander, ma'am?
Nothing.
Thank you, ma'am.
Well, I guess I better pull that one that was the same, B5.
B8. Just pull them both.
B5 and B8.
Thank you. Mike?
No items, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Paul?
None.
Ernie?
No items.
We're on a roll.
Sorry, 9 Delta 12.
Darn it. Did you say 9D12? 9 Delta 12. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Starr. Mr. Flynn?
Ms. Osiander got mine, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Johnston?
No, thank you.
Mr. Birch?
No items.
Ms. Drummond?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 9 Delta 6, please.
Thank you. The administration?
No items.
Thank
I'm
you.
sorry, Mr. Chairman. Oh, yeah, that's right. Never mind. Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay. Please do a voice vote on the consent agenda.
I agree with you.
Ms. Osiander.
This is on the entire consent agenda?
The consent agenda minus the pulled items.
Minus the pulled items, ma'am.
This was ask unanimous consent, but yes.
Well, we don't have the screen on here, so I need to be able to get it to the public, so.
This is unanimous.
Huh? Well, we could go unanimous, but I thought we'd just do each one. Mike?
Yes.
Paul?
Mr. Honeman?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Starr?
Yes.
Mr. Flynn?
Yes.
Mr. Trainee?
Yes.
Ms. Johnston? Ms. Gray Jackson is excused. Mr. Birch?
Yes.
Ms. Drummond?
Yes.
That was approved unanimous. The consent agenda is done. Mr. Mayor, was there anybody that was appointed that was not pulled that you'd like to let us know about?
I can't see everybody, but if anybody who was recently appointed to the Board of Commission by this action, if you'd come forward and tell the Assembly who you are and what you're serving on. Ms. Brunson, yours was pulled, so you still are up for discussion. Yeah, but anybody else, please come forward. Just come to the mic
Come on
and
down.
just tell people which board and what your name is. And
We'd appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Mayor. My name is Kimberly Wetzel, and I will be appointed to the Historic Preservation Commission.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good evening. My name is Teresa Brisky, and I was recently reappointed to the Senior Citizens Advisory Commission.
Thank you.
Hello, Elizabeth Grover, Historic Preservation Commission.
Good.
Mr. Chair, I'm the chair of the Health and Social Services Commission. I'm starting a new tradition of any new members that join the commission. I was going to walk them up and introduce them. This is our new member, Mr. Robert Morris, and he's very well qualified and can speak for himself.
Thank you. And you missed the IM fund.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much. It's my privilege to serve on Health and Human Services Commission.
Thank you. We appreciate your service.
Thank you.
Dwayne Jones, Police and Fire Medical Trust.
Thank you.
Barbara Trost, Eagle River Parks and Rec Board of Supervisors.
Thank you.
My name is Shannon O'Hara, and I'm from the Youth Advisory Commission.
Thank you for serving. We really appreciate all of you that have a committee you're going to serve on, because the government would not work if it wasn't for what you do. Thank you very much.
Yes, I share those thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First item off the agenda is item 9B5. It's Resolution Air 2010-173.
Before you continue, Mr. Chairman, I'd move to change the order today to take up item 9 Bravo 8 prior to 9 Bravo 5.
Second.
Okay.
Move to approve 9 Bravo 8.
Second.
Like to discuss it, Harriet? Excuse me, Deborah?
Maybe I could provide some explanation.
Go ahead, Mr.
Okay.
Glenn.
Told me Harriet twice. Yeah.
This is a viewpoint learning project that we discussed briefly a couple of weeks ago informally, and I applaud the administration and Ms. Frasca specifically for bringing it forward to us. The concept here is to involve the Anchorage residents and neighbors in our planning for the 2011 budget. The difference between what I've put before you and what the administration proposed is simply a fund source. There's a total of $55,000. In the administration's proposal, they proposed $25,000 come from a grant from the MLNP Community Grants Fund. In return for those dollars, the administration has committed to including questions about energy in the discussion. While I don't object to energy-related questions being part of the discussion, I don't think it should be a quid pro quo, and it perhaps creates the impression that this budget discussion is not in fact neutral, but instead influenced by the fund source. I inquired, and I appreciate the administration bringing forward a potential alternative fund source. We have over $280,000 in our certificates of participation interest reserve, and I think that's a more appropriate fund source. It removes any hint of influence over this process and allows us to move forward. So with that, I would recommend to the body we approve item 9 Bravo 8, and then we can simply postpone definitely 9 Bravo 5. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion from assembly members or the administration?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Appreciate Mr. Flynn's summary of the project. We're looking to work with MLNP for a number of reasons. Number one, I think if you've looked at their budget, they, I think, have budgeted over $300,000 this year for community grants. And I think certainly, the case can be made that many of those are on a community-wide basis and not strictly narrowed to things that might directly benefit their ratepayers. But we're not concerned at all that the source of the funds will somehow skew the dialogue, because the people who are conducting the dialogue really are not concerned with the source of funds. It's a firm from outside that specializes in just these form of community dialogues. They're very, very well respected, and I don't think that the source of funds will have any bearing whatsoever. Secondarily, we are trying to reserve monies in some of our other accounts because we've given you phase 1, and you've postponed on several occasions now phase 2 of our liability briefings that we've gone into executive session over. And, I think it's prudent for us to, we wouldn't be able to use MLNP grants for liability payments, but we could use these other funds. So it's important for us to, we think, keep those other funds reserved at this time and take advantage of the generous offer from Mr. Posey at MLNP and his participation in this community project. So we would urge a no on B8 and a yes on B5.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Osiander?
Two questions now. Could you clarify for me what the certificate of participation debt fund is? That doesn't ring a bell with me.
Through the chair, this is the interest that was earned on the certificates of participation in 2009. So when those dollars were appropriated last year from Fund 719 to Fund 101 to restore fund balance, the interest was not appropriated. So at the end of the year, there was a balance of $284,000 remaining in Fund 719.
And it was intended to be used for?
The original funding here was bonds back many, many years ago.
All right.
And when we moved, or actually when the previous administration moved the $6.5 million from 719 to Fund 101, we went through, the administration went through the process of ensuring that this was appropriate by consulting with bond counsel. And the answer is yes, it could be used on an unrestricted basis.
Okay. I guess I didn't realize that the administration preferred B5 to B8. Have we, Mr. Chairman, then already reordered the agenda to deal with B8 first?
That was the motion that was made, was to do.
I didn't remember we voted on it. That was why I'm asking.
Yeah, there was no objections to it, Ms. Osiander, so we are taking B8 first. Then we deal with B5.
Thank you.
On B8, is there any more discussion? Madam Clerk, please conduct the vote. Mr. Flynn?
One final point, Mr. Chairman. The original reason I sought a different fund source rather than ML&P is quite simply, recognize that MLP's community grants do not exclusively benefit its ratepayers, its service area. They do, in fact, provide a greater benefit to the Anchorage residents and, frankly, some of our visitors. But it troubled me that one of the fund sources came from a distinct service area, and frankly, I have a hard time going back to the neighborhoods I represent and telling them that their rate dollars are going to help fund this community discussion over our budget future. But other ratepayers in other service areas won't participate, and that troubled me, and that's why I originally started on this process. And when I learned that there was again a sort of a quid pro quo to there'd be access to energy related questions, strengthen my resolve. This is the appropriate step. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Johnston?
Yes, Mr. Flynn. Then how do you feel when we receive basically dividend payments from ML&P, and that benefits the whole community?
You're slowly stumbling into an area I'm addressing with more and more concern. I'll leave it at that.
Any other discussion? Ma'am, please conduct the vote.
Mr. Flynn?
Yes.
Mr. Starr?
No.
Mr. Hall?
No.
Mr. Honeman?
Yes.
Mr. Gutierrez?
Yes.
Ms. Osiander?
Yes.
Ms. Drummond?
I'm sorry, are we voting on 5 or 8?
We're voting on 8.
Yes.
Mr. Birch?
No.
Ms. Gray Jackson is excused. Ms. Johnston? No. Mr. Traney?
Yes.
Passed 6-4.
Passed 6-4. That is approved.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In light of that, I would move to postpone item 9, Bravo 5 indefinitely.
Second.
Is there objection to postponing item 5 indefinitely? Seeing none, that is postponed, Madam Clerk, indefinitely. Next item in front of us is item 9D6, the same memorandum, AM 347, 2010, School Board Advisory Commission appointment. That was pulled by Ms. Drummond. Ma'am?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Number 1, Ms. Gray Jackson is out of town this meeting.
Point of order.
Yes, ma'am.
Motion.
Need a motion.
I would not move to approve this item, so I'd prefer somebody else.
And your motion is to postpone for 2 weeks? Is that what you want to do?
Yeah, you need a motion to approve first, and then, so Mr. Birch's motion, so moved. Is there a second?
There's a second. Harriet?
Okay, thank you. Ms. Gray Jackson is out of town and expressed a desire to vote on this issue.
Your mic, please.
Ms. Gray Jackson is out of town and expressed a wish to vote on this issue on the meeting of June 22nd, so if it's all right with the body, I'd like to move to postpone it until the next meeting.
Second.
Mr. Starr?
I actually object to that. I'm trying as a budget and finance director to get the dialogue going for directives to the school board and the school budget process. And this is these folks are already invited to our June 17th Budget and Finance Committee meeting. It'd be helpful to have a full body, and I think you've got an active citizen who's willing to step up. And the quicker we can get them online, the meeting of the 17th would be real helpful to have the full input of the community and start to work towards a budget directive for ASD. And this body, this is critical, just like the BAC. The more people involved, the better response we get. So, granted, Ms. Gray Jackson's not here. She chose, I guess, she wasn't able to call in either. Is that couldn't get her on the phone and propose?
Can't get her on the
I
phone
believe
later.
she's traveling.
Okay. Well, again, I kind of object to that as a simple appointment and really non-controversial.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Burt, sir?
Yeah, I also object. We've got a good candidate here. It's hard enough to find volunteers, and I think we need to move forward with this. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Honeman?
Yeah, I was actually getting phone calls right up to the time I walked in the door. This afternoon's the first time I'd heard some comments of concern, so it would be very fitting to actually get a little delay here to kind of do some more research on the background.
Thank you. Any other discussion? If not, Madam Clerk, please run the vote because I think it's going to be interesting. And the question in front of us is to postpone for 2 weeks on this item. Madam Clerk?
Mr. Starr?
No.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Honeman?
Yes.
Mr. Gutierrez?
Yes.
Ms. Osiander?
No.
Ms. Drummond?
Yes.
Mr. Birch?
No.
Ms. Gray Jackson is excused. Mr. Johnston? Mr. Trainee?
Yes.
Mr. Flynn?
Yes.
That passes 6-4.
6-4. That item is postponed for a meeting in 2 weeks. It'll be back on the 22nd. Next item in front of us is on page 3. It's item 9D12. Same memorandum AM 334, 2010, sole source contract with Ultra Geosciences for assistance with PCB site cleanup for the municipality of Anchorage. Heritage Land Bank, $200,000. That was pulled by Mr. Starr, sir. Need a
Move to
motion.
approve.
Second.
Mr. Starr, sir?
Well, we got answers to the question Ms. Osiander posed on it. I see the transmitted came in at 3:32 today, so I didn't have enough of my time to query that. But Mr. Posey, could I talk to you for a moment here? I got a few questions about the origins of PCBs. And I guess the directive here is that nowhere in the appropriation or that it seems like it's fully burdened on HLB, but HLB is not a generator of PCBs. Don't they come out of transformers and electrical system components?
Through the chair, Mr. Starr, PCBs come from a great deal of sources. We found in some places here in Alaska they used it to mix with paint for painting different buildings. So PCBs have been used in a lot of different things, and they're in small transformers. So during the 64 earthquake, everything that fell out of ceilings and everything else ended up.
Well, here's the rub, though, is they identify that as a prospective area. It came out of Glen Square, and you had a transmission site that was moved out of Glen Square. That's why I asked you the question, is that nowhere do I see the responsibility that ML&P may have for that. Do you know about PCBs that may have come off the Glen Square area?
Through the chair, Mr. Starr, our old Sub-14 was tested. We've been removing all of the PCBs from our whole system for the last 7 to 8 years. We did not find any PCBs at that site, even when we tested down to the requisite point that was required. And so therefore, this dirt actually came, I think, from the dumping site of what happened in the 64 earthquake, because parts of the part of the Penny's garage walls and everything else was actually found in this area. So I'm not sure.
The Glen Square property, is that what you're saying?
Say that again?
In the Glen Square area,
Yes,
that's
sir.
where they moved it to?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I guess it would behoove the study if you guys can stay close to that, if you found that you were the generator, either prior directors or whatever with knowledge. You know, they seem...
We're ready to step to the table for that we cause, and we're willing to help the city identify where it might have come from. But from my understanding of what was found at the site, most of it was the stuff that came out of the earthquake-damaged part of the city, and because of what they found in there, and that's about the extent of my knowledge.
Okay.
But we did investigate Sub 14, which is the old Sub 14, and we did not have any reports or records of spills.
Okay. All right. Thanks. That's all I have.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Johnston?
Yes, and I know that this was a previous administration, but it was my understanding that the developer at the time was supposed to be responsible for the cleanup of the property, and that was why the price of the property was discounted. Is that correct?
That's part of it. That's correct, ma'am.
And at this point, do we have any understanding of how the PCB got moved from one municipal property to another?
We do not know why it was moved to the other site without the proper documentation, nor do we know who specifically moved it to the other site. We do know that it was moved from Glen Square to another municipal site. And as you know, we are dealing with the Reed Boulevard site presently. And as I believe you were informed, we basically will be doing what we have to do to mitigate that site. However, we are investigating, and we will be going through the legal system to bring in all of the other PRPs, principal responsible parties, that were also involved in that incident.
So we would be authorizing this expenditure, but within hopes that at some point whoever might be responsible will reimburse the city?
That is correct.
Mr. Birch, you were led earlier. Comments, sir?
My question's been answered. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from Assembly members? Ask unanimous consent. Seeing no objection, Madam Clerk, that item is approved by the body. Let's see, it's too early for appearance requests, but we can go to item 11A. It's old business unfinished action on public hearing items.
There was a motion on the floor.
Need a motion on the floor on this one.
I've distributed an S version. I'd like to move the S version.
Second.
Who said that?
I did.
Mike, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick analysis of the difference between the original resolution we saw at our last meeting and the S version. The S version takes a strong stance on the part of the body against a new artillery range that would be located only some 1,000 to 1,500 yards off the back of Muldoon and other East Anchorage neighborhoods, but remains neutral on the question of year-round or just sort of status quo firing only in the winter on the Eagle River Flats range. So it doesn't take a position on options 1 or 2, which would be at Eagle River, but just states the sense of the body in opposition to option number 3, which is would be a brand new, very expensive artillery range right next to our East Anchorage neighborhoods. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Osiander and Mr. Starr. Ms. Osiander?
I actually want to thank Mr. Gutierrez for this S version, and it mirrors an amendment that I had prepared to offer to the original. I agree with him that Muldoon site is not the best, but I'd hate to preclude the opportunity for residents of Eagle River to comment in a public hearing on which of the other 2 options they prefer. So I am prepared, though, to vote for the substitute version and would actually like to be added as a co-sponsor.
Madam Clerk, would you please make that happen?
That will happen.
Thank you. Is that all, Ms. Osiander? Mr. Starr, sir?
Yeah, likewise, I'd like to be added as a sponsor, too. I appreciate Mr. Gutierrez and Mr. Honeman identifying the areas that aren't good, and in that. There has been public hearings. We've got some resident community members from my area that have been going to the base discussions, and there hasn't been an overwhelming negative response from the community. We want to embrace our military folks, and quite honestly, just from the research I've done, I think it'll actually help our economic situations. The troops don't travel out of town as often. They've been going up to Fairbanks. And so I think really the idea that they can stay close to home, be with their families on the non-deployment times, was well illustrated in what you wrote. I appreciate the efforts to give clear direction to the military neighbors that we have. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Starr. Mr. Honeman?
Yeah, just briefly, I met with both the commanding general of the Army base as well as the garrison commander on Memorial Day, and hoping to use that as a kind of a impetus to try to at least drop the discussion. I'm sure that at some point they'll have their be able to ring in on theirs. But as Mr. Starr said, there have been some public hearings. I believe it closes June 15th, the public comment period for the military base. So looking forward to hopefully moving towards a better resolution than the one in the Molden area. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion from the same members? Ask unanimous consent. Is there any opposition to that? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, that item is approved unanimously.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I would just ask that if the clerk would provide, once the resolution is signed by you to the folks on base, they need to have comments in writing, and that public comment period closes, as Mr. Honeman pointed out, on the 15th of this month.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
That item is approved. Next item is item 11B, Ordinance AO 2010-43, an ordinance amending English Municipal Code Section 15.20.020 regarding abatement of illegal campsites, public nuisance, Department of Law, same memorandum AM 297-2010 that goes along with it. What we'd like is
Mr. Chairman,
for the body to make a motion to postpone it for 2 weeks.
Mr. Chairman, as we discussed with the administration yesterday, move to postpone until our next meeting on June 20th.
Second.
Any discussion? Ms. Osiander.
Well, a couple of things. Ms. Osiander, first, as previously mentioned, Ms. Gray Jackson wishes to participate in the discussion of this. Also, I apologize. I was remiss. I did my best to get an S version to you in a prompt manner. Unfortunately, I didn't get it out to you until Friday. I want to give people time to digest that, and I'm going to develop a memorandum explaining what it does and what it does not do related to public policy versus litigation. In that the S version, I think, addresses the public policy concerns that we heard 2 weeks ago, but does not address the litigation sufficient that it would be withdrawn by the parties that brought it.
Ms. Osiander?
Okay, some of that is a little bit contrary to what I was hearing via the email chain on this, and so I just wondered if the administration could comment.
By all means.
Mr. Mayor, sir?
We don't oppose the postponement.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Starr, sir?
I guess through the administration, did the ACLU actually file a lawsuit against the city, or were they just threatening to do that?
Excuse me, through the chair, Mr. Starr, they did file a lawsuit.
So are we expending legal fees to defend that, or what's the take on the administration expenses for that right now?
The first response to that complaint was due today, and we did prepare a response.
So what actions will we have to provide legally between now and the postponement time frame? More legal resources?
There should not be any actions that will need to be taken between now and the next assembly meeting.
Are you helping Mr. Flynn, or is it strictly our side that's Ms. Tucker?
I
it was
think
for you.
we're all in the same boat.
Well, I would hope. I mean, it's sort of us against them concept, but I'm frustrated that the ACLU feels with the progress we're making that they wouldn't back down and save the city some money legally. But okay, thank you very much. Answer the question.
Thank you. Is there objection to postponement for 2 weeks, or next meeting? Seeing no objection, item is postponed. It will come up on our next meeting on the 22nd. We're now down to appearance requests, and we cannot start those till 6 o'clock, so we're taking a break till 6, at which time the gentleman that's asked to speak to us will be here. The item 12A will be taking at 6. So take a quick break. Item 12A, and this appearance request, Stephen Cochler, regarding installation of a quarter-pipe skateboard ramp at Taku Skateboard Park. Please come forward. It's your Eagle Scout project, I understand.
Yeah.
Welcome to the body, sir.
My name's Steven. I'm working on my Eagle Scout project to take place at the Taku Campbell Skate Park. I've received approval from the Boy Scout Council, from the Taku Community Council, and from the Parks Department. Here is a kind of a diagram of what I want to do. There's a huge dirt hill going from the parking lot right up here down into the skate park, which is here. And I've seen kids try and jump over the hill and kind of get hurt on it. And the Parks Department has been trying to board up this gate right here for a while. And one piece of board just keeps getting torn down and torn down. And what the quarter pipe installment will do is it'll provide a safe place to walk onto off of the dirt hill, and it'll keep kids from jumping over it and hurting themselves. And it also matches the other features there to kind of provide more fun to the park. And that's basically what I want to do, and I've already received a grant from the Rasmussen Foundation to work on it, and that's my Eagle project. Just filling you guys in on what it's going to be and what it's going to end up like.
Questions from Assembly members? Mr. Honneman.
First of all, thanks for trying to find a good project to work on the Eagle Scouts for the community, betterment of the community. What pack are you with?
Troop 26.
26? Or Troop, I'm sorry, Troop 26.
Yeah.
And have you talked to any of are there any nearby residences or neighborhood? I don't see anything in there. I'm looking at Taku Park, and then I'm looking at Spenard Skateboard Park now. The one on Spenard, is that off Minnesota there then? Is that?
Yeah, it's Minnesota.
Okay.
Right there.
Have you talked to any of the neighbors or developed any flyers or anything for the neighbors?
I haven't actually at the Taku Skate Park. Most of the closest road is probably about 500 to 600 feet away, so it's not really very close to the skate park at all. But it's down the street a little bit, so I don't think it would really affect it, but I can still do that if you want.
Wouldn't be a bad idea to put something up, even if it's just a flyer introducing yourself, a point of contact, email something, and with your name in it. It's always better to have information up front, so nobody tries to sandbag you in left field.
Yeah.
And thank you again.
Mr. Hall, sir.
Yeah, Stephen, I'm really excited about this project. I sat on the review committee when we awarded the scholarships at the Anchorage Park Foundation. We received a grant for $341,000 from the Rasmussen that we passed through. We gave grants last week to 17 different entities in the community that are all going to go out and do projects here. And the partnerships are incredible. The way we're leveraging these dollars are amazing. The 17 are actually coming up with close to $400,000 in matching funds to go with this. And with the labor that's included, we figured the leverage on this is about $5 to 1, which means with the money that we've got in projects like you're doing, there's going to be about $2 million worth of work done in those 17 parks over this summer. So great job. And I think it's pretty neat that you're a skateboarder and going to get to enjoy that yourself when you're done.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Birch, sir.
I just want to congratulate you on a great project, and I know I've seen the skateboard park in Girdwood for years, and kind of also noticed that there's with increasing frequency, there's efforts to kind of shoo kids off with skateboards from around commercial buildings and properties. So it's nice to have an alternative for outlet and recreation. And good work and good luck.
Thank you very much.
Ms. Drummond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much for coming. I'm trying to determine where exactly this park is. Is it the Taku Park that's off of 76th in that pretty industrial zone?
It's actually on C Street in Diamond. It's a left. If you're going down Diamond right before the C Street light, it's a left on Stormy Road.
Going north, left off Diamond going north.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that is part of, that's the south end of that park, and that's quite an industrial area. So I don't think, for the benefit of my colleagues, I don't think they'll be disturbing anybody. There are not a lot of people living in that area. It's quite industrial, lots of warehouse condos and that sort of thing. So thank you very much for your work to benefit the community. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Mr. Gutierrez has a question for you, sir. Mr. Gutierrez?
Not a question, just wanted to say job well done, great project and a great presentation. Thank you. Very well done.
To administration, does he have all the permits approved that he needs? Do you know?
We'll find out.
If you have a problem, come back and talk to us.
All right, we'll
It's
do.
good to see an Eagle Scout project that provides service to this town. We really appreciate it. You said your troop, what troop are you?
26.
Who supports that troop?
I want to say Amazing Grace Lutheran, yeah.
Okay, good. Well, anytime you guys want to come and talk to us, we used to have Boy Scouts show up here all the time. When they were doing their Faith in God Award or something like that, they would come in here and identify themselves. So next time you're there, invite them to come back to the assembly meetings. Because we'd like seeing young people in this town that are involved in Scouts.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here. We appreciate it, sir. Next item in front of us is under new public hearings. This is item 14A, Ordinance AO 2010-41, an ordinance authorizing the sale of properties foreclosed for delinquent taxes and for special and/or for special assessments. Public hearing this item is now open. Anybody wishing to testify, please come forward. State your name and spell it clearly for the clerk. I would appreciate it. As they know, the public hearing is closed. What's the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Discussion from assembly members. Seeing none, Madam Clerk, since our electronic system's out, would you please conduct the vote?
Ms. Osiander.
Yes.
Mr. Gutierrez.
Yes.
Mr. Honeman.
Yes.
Mr. Hall.
Yes.
Mr. Starr.
Yes.
Mr. Flynn.
Yes.
Mr. Trainee.
Yes.
Ms. Johnston. Ms. Gray Jackson is excused. Mr. Birch.
Yes.
Ms. Drummond.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, it's unanimous.
That was unanimous. Thank you. The next item in front of us is item 14B, Ordinance AO 2010-45, an ordinance amending H Municipal Code subsection 21.45.310H.2 regarding buffer landscape requirements for child care centers. And there's the same memorandum that comes along with it, AM 303-2010. Public hearing is now open. Anybody wishing to testify, please come forward. State your name clearly for the clerk, and please spell your last name. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is David Johnson, Johnsson, and I serve Pastor Richard Irwin as executive pastor at Anchorage City Church. With me is Mary Ellen Fritz. She's the founder and director of the Anchorage Family Resource Center and the Vineyard Early Learning Center. And she's passing out now a copy of this statement, also an aerial view of the property of City Church, as well as pictures of our facility and the surrounding area. City Church is located at the intersection of 100th and Minnesota. We're currently involved in a number of community service projects. A few examples: our food shelf program provides groceries for families of about 400 people each month. We have a high school completion program where we're serving young people, and we are currently at capacity with a waiting list on that. We have a ministry to homeless single moms with children called Beacon Hill, and we're currently serving 5 families, waiting list there as well. And at Mayor Sullivan's request, our senior pastor has been part of the homeless task force, and we've stepped up to offer our facilities as emergency cold weather shelter. And finally, we've met all the licensing requirements to open the Vineyard Early Learning Center. It's a preschool and child care center, prioritizes services for low-income families, provides training and marketable job skill development for families in poverty. Now, near the end of the licensing process for the preschool, we discovered that landscaping requirements would be a financial hurdle that we probably could not overcome. If you've got that aerial photo, you can see we're surrounded currently by trees and natural landscaping. The existing code would require that we provide a costly landscape buffer around the entire property, and given the wetlands nature of those surrounding properties, it seems likely to us that the land would not be developed for housing anytime soon. We're here to support the amendment of the code, Chapter 21, regarding buffer landscaping requirements for child care centers. And this proposed amendment would allow the planning director to approve an alternative landscape or fencing plan that would provide enough buffering for adjacent uses, or make the determination that the landscape buffer is unnecessary due to lot size in relation to the use. For our situation, if the amendment's approved, it would remove the last hurdle to opening the child care center, and we're humbly asking your approval of the amendment. Thank you for hearing us tonight. We appreciate your service for Anchorage.
Thank you, sir. We have a few questions. Mr. Birch first, sir.
I simply want to commend you for your perseverance with this. I know it's been a long, hard struggle. This looks like this will do the job, and appreciate your efforts and initiative here, and the good work that you're providing to the community. What is I haven't tracked 100th. What's the time frame for? Is that connection going to happen? The connection between Minnesota and?
Well, it's not been decided that I'm aware of. The connector of 100th Avenue, I don't know. I know it's being discussed, but we haven't heard a timeline.
Great. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Other questions from Assembly members? There don't appear to be any. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Anybody else wishing to testify, please come forward. Anyone at all? Hearing and seeing no one, the public hearing is closed. What's the wish of the body?
Second.
Any discussion from Assembly members? Ms. Johnston? You moved it. Any comments, ma'am?
I guess I could ask the administration if this will solve, I know we've been working on this problem for a while, and if this will solve the issue, and does it set any unnecessary precedent for other situations, or will this be a case that...
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Johnson, we support the amendment. We think it's a practical solution to the way the code is presently written. It's an onerous requirement, the way it's presently written, when you have a small facility within a larger facility, and it will not negatively impact future properties as they develop elsewhere in the community.
Thank you.
Any other comments from Assembly members? Not seeing any. Madam Clerk, please conduct the vote.
Mr. Gutierrez?
Yes.
Mr. Honeman?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Starr?
Yes.
Mr. Flynn?
Yes.
Mr. Trainee?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson? Yes. Ms. Gray Jackson is excused. Mr. Birch?
Yes.
Ms. Drummond?
Yes.
Ms. Osiander?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, it's unanimous.
That was approved unanimously. How soon can you open? Okay. Good luck. Thanks for persevering in this. Next item in front of us is item 14C, Ordinance AO 2010-46, an ordinance amending Anchorage Municipal Code, Title 16, to enact a new chapter regarding the cold weather plan for homeless persons. Health and Human Services, there's a semi-memorandum attached, AM 304-2010. Public hearing on this item is now open. Anybody wishing to testify, please come forward. Yes, your name and spell it again.
David Johnson, Johnsson.
Welcome, sir.
Well, thank you. Appreciate you hearing me again. Well, our senior pastor, Richard Irwin, has served on the Homeless Task Force, has been part of the team effort in the community here to make Anchorage safer in the winter for the homeless among us. And Anchorage City Church supports the amendment to Title 16 that would make it possible for churches to shelter homeless people during dangerous winter conditions. Now, I understand that one side effect of the amendment would be that it would become legal in Anchorage for people to sleep during church services. We're a little nervous about that, but I think we can live with it. Well, seriously, we've been pleased to be part of the team effort aimed at making Anchorage a safer place for the homeless. We've already assembled shelter kits and training for the cold winter nights ahead. We're looking forward to partnering with the city and other community organizations and churches to help the homeless. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Honeman?
Yes, sir. I just want to thank you again for your participation in trying to help find the solution, a good creative solution to this community problem. Now, the question is, how many people do you think or anticipate you'll be able to house even temporarily?
Well, we want to start, we don't have practical experience with this ourselves, so our intention is to start small. We'll start with a few people, and then as we understand, we can go from a few, 3, 4 people, to a larger number as we understand what our capacity and ability is.
Okay. And then at those times, there'll be someone from the church, I expect, will be monitoring or on site?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Other questions from assembly members? There don't appear to be. I think we could put amendment, if you'd like us to, require the churches to be filled up from the forward back, not the way it normally is from the back forward.
Whatever works.
You take care of yourself. Anybody else wishing to testify, please come forward. Welcome to the meeting, ma'am.
Good evening. My name is Susan Bomalaski, B-O-M-A-L-A-S-K-I, and I'm the Executive Director of Catholic Social Services. And I was excited to see Anchorage City Church here. I'm glad the previous ordinance passed. And we run Clare House, a family emergency shelter, and in partnership over this past winter with the other family shelters in town, McKinnell House and Awake, we developed an ad hoc emergency cold weather plan so that no family would find themselves in their cars or on the street when the temperature was below 32 degrees. So during that time, the churches expressed interest in doing the same. And as a member of the mayor's homeless leadership team, it was discussed at that forum the need to have this ordinance that's presented to you tonight in order to have the churches be able to do that. So we're in support of that ordinance. I would like to suggest that the temperature be changed from 15 degrees Fahrenheit to 32 degrees Fahrenheit. And while that may seem warm and it may seem like it encompasses the entire winter in Anchorage, it does. And what that does is brings this ordinance in line with what we currently do at the Brother Francis shelter, which is we raised our cold weather temperature from 15 to 32 in an effort to prevent deaths over the winter from people on the streets. And unfortunately, we have had deaths with the spring, but over the winter, we were over capacity at BFS. We ran a second shelter over at Beans, but nobody passed away of the cold. And we would recommend that the same be done with this family shelter ordinance. I'd also like to state that as far as the churches are concerned, that it would be individual families and individuals who are not under the influence of alcohol or other substances, because they could be more appropriately served in another setting. And last winter, between the three shelters, we did serve 32 families. So we're not looking at a huge number. And when they came into the shelters as overflow, they did have to sleep on mats, on the floor. And we are partnering with the faith-based community around training for the individual volunteers that will be doing this. So again, we're in support of it, but I would recommend changing the temperature from 15 degrees to 32 degrees.
Thank you, ma'am. We have some questions. Mr. Flynn, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Bomaleski, as one of, I guess, the only one left on the Assembly who was part of the Homelessness Leadership Task Force meetings, my recollection when we discussed this was that there was consensus around the 15-degree threshold. Did I miss something?
No, that's the emergency shelter providers group got together after that, and you're right. The leadership team, there is a memo in here. It does say 15. When we were talking, we did an after actions kind of report about how the cold weather plan worked over the winter, and it was 32 degrees-ish, that was kind of used, and we did feel that it was important to bring it into conjunction with the main shelter provider for homeless individuals. So that was the emergency shelter, family shelter providers group, not the mayor's homeless leadership team.
Oh, okay. Okay. Would you object to our recommending the task force take another look at this just to make sure they're comfortable with the recommendation? We moved to 32 degrees before we, given it's fortunately June right now. Would that be a reasonable course of action in your mind?
Yes, sir, that'd be fine. I think we do need to have some consensus around it, definitely, but 15 degrees is pretty cold for families to be in their cars, so I'm sure you understand.
I'm not disagreeing with you. I just want to make sure we're bringing everybody along who's been involved in this process. So thank you very much, Dr.
Thank you.
No more further questions, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Honeman, sir.
Yes, thank you again for your efforts in trying to help address this community problem. One thing I know that the police department did have a policy at one point. I believe it was 0 degrees or with the wind chill factor went below. I'm not sure if that's the same or it's mandated that an officer respond and actually try to seek immediate shelter for someone who's in that area. I do know that temperature is even at 40 degrees or even a little warmer. Someone who's wet is serious and dangerous exposure. So I do recognize that. Nothing, of course, would prevent your organization or any churches in taking someone at any location and at any temperature, I guess. Is that right?
Well, I guess I have a question about that then. Is that true? Or would be because of what the ordinance is doing, which is letting these other facilities, the churches, operate as temporary shelters overnight based on the weather? I don't have the expertise, I guess, to say exactly what that, if that would allow that, then there would be no question, because that's what we did at BFS. I think maybe CSP and others are still 15, but we raised ours to 32, so.
We'll get to
Mr. Honeman.
Okay. And then the only other thing is I just need to kind of emphasize again, I'm going to reach out there for there is a segment of this community that's homeless that needs addressed, and that is those are inebriated persons. And right now, currently, we're woefully lacking in facilities for that. I mean, they're going to try some new creative solutions, obviously, but it just seems like that there are some folks that are just really way underrepresented. So if you guys can do whatever you can to help in that area, we'd really appreciate that.
Yes, sir, and that's why we did raise that temperature limit over the winter, and we were serving about 375 people a night just for that reason, and we are working around some of the other creative solutions through Brother Francis Shelter.
Yeah, no, I was specifically addressing the inebriated persons.
Yeah.
I know that you don't want them in the churches, but, most other locations are excluding folks there as well, so we're looking for a segment.
Yes, a good point. We don't exclude them from BFS if they've been drinking. If they're behaviorally inappropriate and it's the cold weather alert, we either call CSP or we call APD so that they are housed, but that's an excellent point. We don't put them out in the cold because they're especially vulnerable if they've been drinking.
Thank you.
Thank you. There are no other questions, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else wish to testify, please come forward. You can ask your question, Pat, if you want, when we get into debate portion, if you would. I'd like to get everybody here who wants to testify on this done first. Welcome, sir.
Hello, my name is Jeffrey Humphreys. It's spelled GeoffreyHumphreys. This is my first time ever speaking before this body. I have only a small suggestion, and that is under 16.120.030 A.1.A, rather than saying churches designated, perhaps say structures designated.
It's easier if you tell us what line and what page, sir.
It's on the second page.
Page 2, line 19, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir.
You can talk.
I think that would make the ordinance more constitutional, and I think it would also extend its scope to cover institutions that are not necessarily social service facilities or churches.
Okay.
That's all.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Anybody else wish to testify, please come forward. Welcome back.
You too. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Mayor, members of the Assembly, my name is David Dunsmore. That's D-U-N-S-M-O-R-E. Just saying, because I'm both happy that this ordinance is coming forward. That we certainly have a problem in the city, and we have had for many years the problem of not enough shelter space, and too many of our neighbors, your constituents, have died for no reason other than that this city has failed in its duties under its charter and the laws of this state to provide for the health and welfare of our community. And I'm glad that we're taking this action, although certainly more needs to be done. I do have a few technical things with this ordinance I want to point out that it could improve the wording. One was in the same section the previous speaker was pointing at, but on page 2, lines 16 through 35 creates a three-tiered level of different levels of permission that various organizations would be able to have. A church would be able to house homeless families and individuals that are not under the influence of substances. A social service agency would be able to house all homeless people, and then any other organization would be subject to restrictions put on it by the department. I think that this is somewhat problematic in how often you have groups that could arguably be either churches or social service agencies or both. And I don't think you're wanting to create an issue where the court's going to have to decide, does being a church preclude you from being a social service agency or vice versa. I think it would be simpler to just give the department discretion on a case-by-case basis to evaluate the facilities and the quality of the people who are going to be working there. About, I think, if it's a church who has, people qualified and has the right plan, I think they should be able to, if they want to and put a good plan, be able to have the same thing as I also was glad to hear the testimony about raising the temperature level. I think it's also worth considering that temperature alone is not one of the only factor in death. I mean, those of us who enjoy the outdoors here certainly know that it could be 50 degrees outside, but if you're wet, you're still at risk for hypothermia. Even if you're, wearing, the expensive, outdoor gear that our homeless neighbors probably don't have. I would suggest more flexibility there to allow for more than just temperature and give discretion for these services to be activated probably give the Director of Health and Human Services the authority to activate this plan when weather conditions are needed.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Flynn, sir.
David, thanks for coming down. Good to see you. Regarding your comments on page 2, lines 16 through 35, and someone will correct me if I've misspoken, but my recollection of the conversation at the Homelessness Leadership Task Force was not to set up essentially a bureaucratic process by which these organizations would have to go get approval to provide these services. It was instead to give them blanket approval to do this. And so I heard what you said about, well, maybe there's more potential actors here, but if we create barriers by forcing them to go through HHS, aren't we perhaps being less effective than we could be?
That's a good, through the chair, Assemblyman Flynn, that's a good point. I've been seeing on page 3, line 9, I was saying that the applicant is already required to submit a written plan and protocols to the department. I was seeing that was a step that was already being required there. And my suggestion to just is certainly not the only way to do it. It just strikes me as one, I've known from past assembly debates on liquor ordinance, enforcing the liquor laws, the question about, what is or isn't a church becomes problematic. And I think that the issue wasn't the intent of this is not to restrict anyone, but to say that, if you have the staff and the capabilities and the experience to provide, to handle the higher risk clientele, that then you would be able to, and that if you don't have the same preparation, you wouldn't be able to. And I think that the language can be tweaked to make that happen.
Thanks, David. Appreciate it.
There don't appear to be any other questions. Thank you, sir. Anybody else wish to testify on this issue, please come forward. Anyone at all? Hearing and saying no in the public hearing, this item is closed. What's the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Discussion. Mr. Flynn, sir.
Thank you. Ms. Engel, I don't know if you heard the questions that were raised in the presentations. I think the first one was the idea of increasing the temperature to 32 degrees. And does the administration have a position on that? Would you want to send that back to the task force?
Thank you. Through the chair, Mr. Flynn, the department is in support of the 32 degrees. It was originally discussed by the subgroup of the task force, but felt that that would be too wide to get support. But if there is support, I think that it is in congruence with the other providers and not a reason for us to oppose that. Do you want me to address the other issues, the structure and the approval process?
Yeah, before that, though, real quickly, if we left it at 15, is it your interpretation that those who were currently allowing themselves to go over their normal limits at 15 would be in violation of code?
I think that there's a difference between shelters and then using a building that's not designated as a shelter. I think Mr. Weaver would probably be best to answer that, but I think they're zoned differently.
Okay, we'll move on, let you finish your other responses to the other issues raised, if you don't mind, and then we'll come back to Jerry. Is it okay? However you want to do it.
Mr. Chairman, the emergency, the plan for temporary location of these individuals is temporary, whereas shelters are permanent. And the degrees, it's really up to the body to make the decision.
Thank you, Mr. Weaver.
Any other discussion? Mr. Flynn?
Ms. Engel had a couple more comments, I think, on the other points raised.
If you would like me to.
Please.
I think I can address those.
That'd be fine.
The reason that this is being codified is we have fire codes and we have structural codes. And in order to make sure that the facilities that are being used for shelters meet these codes, that's why we're codifying this. This allows the process to take place for this particular purpose. And with that, it does not grandfather, but it does allow certain things for churches and some of these other buildings that we specify in here to be able to do this function. And so that's why it's being codified, and that's why it's specifically geared to these two types of facilities that we've mentioned so far, because in most cases they do meet most of those codes that are required.
Thank you very much, Mr. Michaelis. With that, Mr. Chairman, I move on page 1, line 30, to amend 15 to 32.
Second.
Discussion, Mr. Flynn?
I'd let the testimony speak for itself.
Okay. Listen, I've got a lot of other people in here, so let me work through them. Mike, on that particular issue?
Not on that particular, on the issue itself, but not to the amendment, sir.
I'll come back to you. Mr. Honeman, on that particular amendment?
No.
Ms. Osiander, on that particular amendment?
Yes, sir. I'd like to hear from both Mr. Weaver and Ms. Engel on all the amendments, if I could.
Well, that was my question, Mr. Chair, was the proposed amendment to change the number 19 on page 2, line 19, from churches to structures. Is that a separate amendment?
That's a separate amendment.
Okay.
And actually, Mr. Starr pointed out, I erred in my original amendment. In addition to line 30 on page 1.
Line 36.
I need to be with line 36.
33?
16 to 33. That is correct.
Mr. Chair, if I
On
could-
this particular amendment, and we'll get to the other one next. On this amendment, ma'am?
Right, I was hoping to hear from them. Ms. Engel and Mr. Weaver, any concern about that amendment? Well, I thought so, but I...
Thank you. Through the chair, Ms. Osiander. I don't believe that we, either Mr. Weaver or I, object to the change to 32 degrees.
Ma'am.
Thank you. Any other comments from assembly members on this amendment? Madam Clerk, please run the vote. Run the vote on it.
Ms. Drummond?
Yes.
Mr. Birch?
Yes.
Ms. Gray Jackson is excused. Ms. Johnston? Yes. Mr. Trainee?
Yes.
Mr. Flynn?
Yes.
Mr. Starr?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Honeman?
Yes.
Mr. Gutierrez?
Yes.
Ms. Osiander?
Yes.
It's unanimous.
That was approved unanimously, so wherever it read 15 degrees and now reads 32, on line 36 where it read 60 and now reads 33 degrees. Mr. Flynn, any other discussion?
Thank you, sir. Nothing.
The chair would entertain a motion, Ms. Osiander, if you would make a motion to change where it says churches to have churches/synagogues. Because
Well, I think according to code, synagogues are considered churches. Mr. Weaver?
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Osiander, we need to look the definition up in the code. I believe it's all inclusive, but technically we need to look the code up. I don't have it with me here.
All right.
look up the code if you would, because I think there are some people that don't quite agree sometimes.
Okay.
Just to make sure we don't leave anybody out. Okay. Mike, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With the amendment that was just passed, this is a terrific plan. This is an outstanding plan. It's kind of one of those things that makes you scratch your head and say, why wasn't this done 30 years ago? As a person of faith, as a Catholic, the church has always been a refuge in times of great need. We used to use the word sanctuary, but that's not politically correct anymore. That's been turned into a dirty word, so I won't say the S word again. But I think the idea of allowing facilities, a church, a synagogue, to become an emergency shelter, to keep people safe in a time of tremendous need when their very lives are in danger is something that fits with the best traditions of every faith that I can think of back centuries upon centuries upon centuries. And I'm very supportive of this. I think this is a great idea, and I'm pleased to see it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Osiander?
Well, going through Title 21, they basically, in some places they say churches and other place of worship. The difficulty, if you add a new category, synagogues, you're going to have a whole bunch of code that needs to be wrapped in.
I think he's got my definition for me.
Mr. Chairman, church is all-inclusive.
That's what.
So it includes everybody. It doesn't exclude anybody. It's fine. Then we'll leave it at churches.
Services, yes.
Ms. Osiander?
Concur.
Thank you. Let's see. Mr. Honeman.
Yeah, and I believe, Mr. Chairman, we probably could, with the suggested amendment to change churches to structures, might be a little more inclusive than just churches. However, I will echo Mr. Gutierrez's sentiment about, there was some discussion whether or not a church is a social service or vice versa, and I believe that they're both. So, but in any event, I think if we change churches to structures, we'd be able to encompass even more.
Thank you. Mr. Sullivan, sir.
Well, I'll wait until if there's another amendment, I'll wait till after any other amendments. But is there more in the queue, Mr. Chairman? Or?
No, sir, there's not.
Okay, very good. Well, I want to thank the members from the Homeless Leadership Task Force, Pastor Johnson and Ms. Pomolowski, for all their hard work, plus staff, in bringing this forward. This is one of several recommendations that the task force did bring forward, and it's the first one that we are formally bringing forward to the Assembly, and there will be more to come. And in answer to the question, why not before, we asked that question literally in the first few months of taking office, and so we're pleased that we can do something to help that very vulnerable population. Winter will be here before we know it, and having at least phase one of the plan in place is a positive thing for the community. So we appreciate the Assembly's support, and I want to thank all those involved. Thanks.
I want to thank the administration for bringing this forward to us. Appreciate it. Help our community. Anybody else wish to discuss anything on the botany? See no one, Madam Clerk. Please conduct a roll call vote.
Ms. Johnston? Yes. Mr. Trainee?
Yes.
Mr. Flynn?
Yes.
Mr. Starr?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Honeman?
Yes.
Mr. Gutierrez?
Absolutely yes.
Ms. Osiander? Ms. Drummond?
Yes.
Mr. Birch?
Yes.
And Ms. Birch Jackson is excused. Mr. Chairman, it's unanimous.
Thank you. That item was approved unanimously by the body. And my thanks to the faith community for stepping forward to do this. It'll save a lot of people this next winter, so thank you very much. Next item in business in front of us is going to be 14D, but before we do that, we've got a Boy Scout troop. So I'd like the Scoutmaster to come forward and identify and have all the boys stand up and tell us what Boy Scout troop you're with. So come on down. Just tell us what troop you are, who supports you, and if the boys would identify themselves, we'd appreciate it.
Certainly. My name is Bob Von Berglund. I'm here with Troop 214. We're supported by the American Legion Post on Brayton, and I'll let the boys introduce themselves.
Post 28.
It's American Legion Post 28.
Okay, thank you.
I'm Rob Bay.
What rank are you in Boy Scouts?
I'm a tenderfoot.
Okay.
I'm John Wilson, and I'm tenderfoot.
I'm Keenan Von Berglund, and I'm a first class.
I'm Mike Andrews, and I'm a scouter.
Good.
I'm Ryan Andres, and I'm Star.
Would you guys see the young man that was here earlier? He's going for his Eagle. That's what you guys need to do, is get to the point where you're doing your Eagle project. We'd love to see you here. Thanks for coming tonight.
And I just want to add that the boys are here working on their Citizenship in the Community Merit Badge, which is one of the Eagle required badges.
Well, if they ever need to talk to us to fulfill the requirements for anything else, just come and see us. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, guys.
Next item in front of us is Resolution Air 2010-142, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly ratifying Executive Order Number 2010-002, an executive order renaming Homestead Court off Sioux Way and Legacy Drive to Sue's Way. And there's a semi-memorandum, AM 269-2010, that accompanies it. Anybody wishing to testify, please come forward. State your name clearly for the record, for the clerk, and spell your last name.
Thank you. This is my first time here as well. Steve Weiner, W-I-E-N-E-R, and I'm here to speak in opposition to this petition seeking to keep our street the name that it is. I guess that's a simple way to put it. We've lived here for almost 22 years in the same street. We've never had a problem with police or fire finding our house during those 21 years. 20 years ago, maybe the systems weren't as sophisticated as they are now, but it seems to us, actually all four of the people on Homestead Court are in agreement with not changing the street name. It seems to us that with the advances in GPS and GIS, that seems like shouldn't be a problem finding our house. What else do I want to say? We invested a large portion of our lifetime in Anchorage and in this house. We have business contacts, professional contacts, lifelong friends that know where we live, and the name change would be disruptive and could compromise our quality of life, our business, our general well-being. I've worked for the federal government for 30 years. I'm now retired, which is why I'm here. Everybody else on the street's still working. So I had the time. But we would implore you to please reconsider the executive order and not approve the ordinance or the thing before you, whatever it is.
The thing you don't like, right?
The thing I don't like, yes. Also, I'd like to take the opportunity to read something very briefly from Debbie Swinney. I think some of you folks may know Dave and Debbie Swinney. They couldn't be here tonight. They did send an email which reads basically, we are unable to attend the June 8th 210 meeting, but wanted to ask you not to ratify the above resolution, changing the name of Homestead Court to Sue's Way. There are 4 homes on the Homestead Court address. We have all filed protests regarding the name change, and she asked to review those emails, although I don't know if the planning department forwarded those on. She goes on to say that they built their own house in 1980, moved into it in 81, and raised both of their children there. They attended Rabbit Creek, Hanshu, and both are graduates of Service High. Besides their personal mail, they have a business. It would not be a simple change. The bottom line is it's not necessary with modern technology. Police and the fire department have been summoned to our court, and there has not been an issue. And I have to say that right next to me, my wife will speak in a minute, and she was one that had to summon the emergency when she cracked her head open, and they found her right quick. Debbie closes with knowing that several of you have lived in your houses for many years, and just maybe you can appreciate why we don't want to change our address. Just put yourselves in our shoes and don't ratify this. Thank you.
Mr. Birch has a question, sir.
Oh, yes.
He's down.
Oh, sorry.
I just had, was there any discussion or proposal or consideration of alternatives like a Homestead Way or Homestead, some variation on Homestead that might be acceptable to the neighbors? I just wasn't that familiar.
There wasn't any discussion from the neighbors, but the planning department really didn't give us much of an option. They just said, we're changing your name to Sue's Way unless you protest, and we did.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Honeman?
Oh. Yes, do you know if the other Homestead Circle, maybe it's for the administration, Homestead Court, was it in existence before this location, or does it may have the answer to that?
I don't have the answer, but it's on the other end of town. It's in a different demographic area. It's got a 4-digit number instead of a 5-digit number for the address. It seems to me, again, with the advances in computer technology, that should not be an issue. And recently, and actually even 10, 15 years ago, there was a neighbor we had that was fairly sickly, and there were emergency folks dispatched there with some regularity and always to the correct spot.
Well, just speaking from 25 years' experience working in law enforcement and most of it here in Anchorage, I can tell you that incidents do happen that create confusion, and sometimes they're real tragic incidents that you need immediate response to. So I recognize the need to have this addressed. I think Mr. Birch was onto something here. If they're just, I guess question to the administration. Do you know what?
Paul, why don't we wait until we get into debate, and then you can question the administration, sir. Any other questions for this gentleman? Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I apologize, I just punched the button. I'm sitting here with my laptop, and I Google mapped Homestead Court. It did not come up with the Homestead Court that's off of Sue's Way. It came up with the one that's significantly further north.
You need to key in an address.
And what address would that be?
13020, anything with 5 digits. It Google Maps for me.
Yeah, but I'd hate for that to happen in an emergency
While she's
situation.
doing that, why don't we move to your wife who wants to testify?
Thank you. I'm done, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I'm Rosemary Weiner. I'm his wife, and again, it's Wiener. And yeah, it's a different zip code, so I think if you provide the zip code, there's no problem. I fell on the ice a few years ago, as my husband said, and was able to get home and call 911, and they showed up immediately, so I didn't have any problem. Anyway, our next-door neighbor is Joe Ralph, who works on the slope, so couldn't be here tonight, but I'm reading his very fine letter, and perhaps this will also add to the impact. I am writing in regard to the proposal to rename Homestead Court to Sue's Way, and want to go on record as being opposed to the issue. I realize the importance of emergency teams having clear and accurate directions to locations for timely response. I believe in the current world of GPS locating that confusion is no longer an issue. In addition, I oppose the change for 2 personal reasons. I have previously been through a street name change while living in Eagle River, where our street was renamed from Admiralty to Andrianoff. The duration of time at that address was relatively short in comparison to my current address, and yet in the process of notification for the address change, I did not get correspondence that eventually negatively affected my credit rating while attempting to purchase a new home here in Anchorage. The duration of time at my current address has resulted in a much wider web of contacts that I wish not to risk hampering with either my financial or social dealings. The second reason is that I have a daughter who is studying abroad, and she too uses this address for some of her mailings. I would like to avoid the potential of her missing an important transmission that could impact her future. Please note that I am strongly opposed to the name change. And it's been our experience that the post office will forward mail for only a couple of months, and then things get lost.
Anything else, ma'am?
I guess not.
Thank you. Questions from assembly members? Thank you. Appreciate it, both of you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to testify, please come forward. Anyone at all? Hearing, saying no in the public hearing is closed. What's the wish of the body? We need a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by Ms. Osiander, seconded by Mr. Hall. Mr. Birch, sir?
Just a couple of questions. I guess I'm just curious as to what sort, and I did look it up in Google Map, and it did pull up with the 13020 Homestead Court, did zero in on this neighborhood. But I guess the question I would have would be the number of property owners impacted in both locations, and whether or not an alternative such as Homestead Way might be appropriate.
Is that the question of the administration?
To the administration and whomever.
Administration?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Birch, perhaps I can respond. I'm sorry, the memorandum should have been more comprehensive with the analysis of the affected properties on both ends. Basically, these are identical street names. The Homestead Court off of Lake Otis has been in existence significantly longer than this particular location. And from looking at it today, the zoning district that it's in, the size of the lots, it's, I believe, multifamily and has many more people on the older street off of Lake Otis. So it is a duplicate. We have about 100 of these that need to come forward, not this particular exact scenario, but we're going through the process. The police and fire have helped us identify a considerable number of these street name issues, and there are issues that need to be addressed.
If I might continue, Mr. Chairman.
Birch, sir.
So am I to understand that it has to be a continuous road? In other words, you can't have two separated homestead names, homestead court names?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Birch, the protocols, it's Sue's Way on both sides. It's just logical for this to be a continuation of Sue's Way.
Well, I guess I look at, I mean, there's some discussion about, the department being able to access a certain location, and I live near Elmore, for instance. Elmore, for instance, is not connected. In other words, you cannot drive between between Abbott and O'Malley on Elmore. It's they're disconnected. So I think, if they get I'm assuming if there's a response requirement on Elmore, that somebody's, smart enough to figure out which stretch of Elmore it's on, whether it's on the north of the park or south of the park. So I guess I'm just asking that, is it an absolute requirement, and if so, how are there other exceptions like Elmore?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Birch, the street naming protocols in this particular scenario would call for continuous street name.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Birch. Ms. Johnston?
Yes, I'd like to ask the police chief. I think we're all quite familiar of why we've come to this point as far as duplication of names of streets.
Excuse me for a second. Ma'am, you're done. We don't have any questions for you. Thank you.
No, I had a comment I wanted to make.
We don't. Well, if somebody wants to ask you a question, then we'll entertain that. But your portion was done, ma'am, unless we've got somebody who has a question for you. Chief?
And so my question is now, I mean, as I say, I think most of us remember why we are going through this process. But now, could you tell me as far as your protocol for an emergency call and what might be different from the case that was in Eagle River 6 years ago? Am I right about 6? Is 6 about it?
It was 7 years ago.
7 years ago.
Chairman Trainee and Assemblyman Johnson. There's protocol issues, there are technical issues, and so I'd like to address them separately. First of all, you should know that there are 4 homesteads in the Anchorage Bowl. There are 2 homestead courts, a homestead trail, and a homestead something else. I've forgotten now what it is. So I believe that Ms. Rutzler over at Public Works is trying to deconflict as many of these as she can, and that's why this one came up. If you look at the map, and I have a copy of it here if you're interested in seeing it, this doesn't really look like a separate street. It looks like a little piece of Sue's Way, so it seemed like this was the one to change. Also, I think there are fewer people living on it than the other homestead court. Now, the issue is not so much GPS, because the way E911 works, the different phone companies submit their data to the integrator. In this case, it's ACS. They work with subcontractors, and they download this information into our 911
equipment. When somebody calls on a landline from one of those phones, we're supposed to get the address. Because if people tell us the address and they're right about it, then there's never a problem, or there shouldn't be. Should not, I don't mean there's never a problem, because there have been. But the issue is if somebody's having a heart attack, they dial 911, they can't speak. There's a domestic violence thing happening, and somebody dials a phone surreptitiously and can't talk on it. We need to get the address. We need to have it right. So we're relying in those circumstances on just on the technology, no way to verify with human contact what that says. And that works fine if the computers always do what they're supposed to do. And I'd like to think that they always will. As we know, tragically, they don't always. Sometimes what happens is an element gets truncated. When you combine data from different phone companies into a single system, they might not eat MTA's data may affect differently than GCI's data. Some little glitch happens and some number gets dropped. That put us off about 6 miles in the Godfrey case when that happened. In that case, it recognized Eagle River Road and gave us Eagle Glacier Loop instead. When you have a hot call going and people's lives are in danger, you don't want to stop and start going to Google Earth or going to other databases and comparing which database says what. You want the information right the very first time. So after that horrible tragedy, we went through trying to clean up everything we could possibly clean up in the city to remove as many possibilities for errors as we could. This is a possibility for error. I think we want to remove it. If you don't remove it, hopefully the system works right. Hopefully we get the information correctly. Hopefully we go there. But there would be a risk in knowing that we have the duplicate out there. And our position is we'd like to remove those risks that we know that we can identify in advance. I myself had my street address changed after the Godfrey affair. I've been through it. I did it. It was a pain for about 6 or 8 months, but it fixed itself.
And you say that there are currently, in fact, I know one homestead just right off from Abbott, but there's currently 4 Homestead Drive, Trail, Court, and does that cause a conflict in itself, just having the same trunk name but different?
If the systems work the way they're designed to work, and we don't have any problem with data corruption, we should be able to sort it out. It should tell you Homestead Court. It should give you the closest cross street. And then if it's having trouble digesting that information, it gives you alternate candidates to do a hand search on. And if everything works well and the dispatcher reads all that, processes it correctly, then it's fine and we get there right away. But there's a lot of moving parts to it, and we don't like introducing a potential variable if we can control that. So this is a part of a much bigger project. We've been doing this now for 7 years. We've been going through the data, trying to make Anchorage's data, absolutely pure and very clean. Not many cities have done this. It's expensive and it's a long process, but in the end, I think it pays off.
Anything else, Jennifer? Any other questions from Assembly members? Thank you, Chief. Any further debate on this item from the body?
Yeah.
Mr. Birch, sir?
I guess just a question of the administration. I look up, I see a Homestead Trail, Homestead Court, Homestead Road, a West Homestead Road, and I'm just, I guess I'm just thinking that maybe we need to allow the neighborhood and the people that have lived in the community for so long some options. And I would, I personally would be interested in seeing this postponed and looking at maybe a Homestead Way or some variation that I just remember how unhappy I was when they changed my zip code. I mean, I had my zip code changed, and I've been living there in the same place for 20 years, and so I think if there's a workaround here that keeps the neighbors happy, I'd sure like to see us take a look at that.
Thank you, Mr. Birch. Administration, your position on this, Mr. Mayor?
Well, we wouldn't support postponement. This is a public safety item, and I am sympathetic to the residents, the 4 residents along this eyebrow, they call it. But if you do look at the street, it is a continuous street with just a little indentation, an eyebrow, and really it's an anomaly to even have a different name on this street, with all due respect to the representatives from the area. I think we have to put public safety interests above inconvenience. And again, I also had my street changed. When I was on the Assembly, we went through a number of changes, and there were some that did not make sense, and I voted against them. But this one just makes sense. I mean, to even put in another name with Homestead in it, I think just clutters it. And as the Chief mentioned, we're trying to eliminate similar names, not add one more that really doesn't make it very, very clear that this is a different street. This is Sue's Way. It's a little indentation off Sue's Way.
Mr. Gutierrez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I actually hesitate to say this. I got to fess up. About 4 years ago, I took a temp job during the holidays for FedEx, and this was part of my delivery area. And I've been looking at this map and looking at this map, and I can tell you that somebody on this little eyebrow didn't get their Christmas present in 2006 because I couldn't find it. I couldn't. All of my maps said Sue's Way, Sue's Way, Sue's Way. There was nothing that said Homestead there. I know changing your address is going to be an inconvenience, but when I think, okay, it was inconvenient that somebody didn't get a Christmas present, when you consider the possibility that somebody might not get responded to promptly on a 911 call, that's a whole different realm. And I think that maybe we need to do this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Somebody said we're going to change the name to Scrooge Gutierrez?
Yeah, and to whoever it was, I sincerely apologize.
Ms. Osiander, before we vote on this, Ms. Osiander.
I want to urge my colleagues to think about public safety here. That the Godfrey incident still reverberates with my neighbors and I think with a lot of folks in this town. It was truly frightening. After that incident, I've talked to a number of people who had address issues that needed clarifying, including people that live very close to me, and for weigh the inconvenience versus potential life safety issues. And I'm going to be voting for this.
That's all that's in the queue. Madam Clerk, please conduct the vote.
Mr. Flynn.
Yes.
Mr. Starr.
Yes.
Mr. Hall.
Yes.
Mr. Honeman.
Yes.
Mr. Gutierrez.
Yes.
Ms. Osiander.
Yes.
Ms. Drummond.
Yes.
Mr. Birch.
No.
Ms. Gray Jackson is excused. Ms. Johnston. No. Mr. Trainee.
Yes.
Okay, that passed. 8-2.
Yep. Understood.
8-2.
That was 8-2. That item is approved by the body. We're now going to take our dinner break. We should be back in about 15 minutes. Then we'll be on to item 14E. Mr. Burt, sir, you have an item you want to take up?
Yes, I would like to take up item 9B9, which is Assembly Resolution 2010-177, with the intent of...
You're going to move for immediate reconsideration, and you're urging a no vote, is that correct?
I am moving for immediate reconsideration and urge a no vote. If I could get a second. Jennifer? Second.
9B9. Ms. Johnson, do you want to second that? Okay. No, it was added.
Yeah, it would be this item is coming up in front of Congress on Thursday, and it would be my intent by urging a no vote on reconsideration that...
You just have to give our clerk time to catch up.
Timing issue. So, pardon me?
I just have to give the clerk a second.
It wasn't in the system because it was laid on the table without prior notice.
Yep.
So, okay, we
Okay.
don't have a vote.
Are we good?
Just take a second. Notice. Jennifer seconded. Immediate reconsideration.
And urge a no vote.
Ms. Osiander on the motion for immediate reconsideration.
That's what I was at. 9 Bravo 9? Oh,
Thank you.
okay.
I read the same thing.
Would you ask unanimous consent for no vote? See no opposition. Madam Clerk, let that.
Okay.
Okay.
Nobody was opposed to that. It was a no vote, unanimous.
Was a no vote. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you,
and
Mr. Birch.
Be my suggestion that if the chairman could sign that this evening, we could probably kick it out the door tonight. Thank you.
Okay.
You just voted the notice of reconsideration. You voted to reconsider. Actually.
We voted to reconsider it. I combined the two, and I'm sorry.
Okay, then.
Keep the record clear. We voted to reconsider.
And that was a no vote.
Now we're urging a no vote.
No.
The screen came up that the reconsideration was on the reading.
No, it was supposed to be 9D9.
I had.
D. Okay. Let's give her a second.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
So you need two votes. You need to notice reconsideration.
Okay. The clerk advises me that we need to vote on the issue of bringing the item back in front of us, which would be a yes vote to reconsider it. And then we'll take a vote to not change it, Chris. Okay? So the first vote is to get it back on the table so we can deal with it. Yes, if I could get a motion in a second, which we've got. We just ask unanimous consent to bring the item back in front of us. Is there any objection? Seeing none. Now, Chris, make your other motion.
Into his
Reconsider.
mic. He needs to be in his mic. You need to be in your mic, sir. It doesn't get in the record otherwise.
I would move for immediate reconsideration on item 9 Bravo 9. That would be Assembly Resolution number 2010-177.
And you're urging a no vote.
I'm urging a no vote.
Wait, you just voted for immediate reconsideration, which brought it back before the body. So now there needs to have a vote on the item. So now there needs to be a motion on the item itself.
Need 3 votes?
Yeah.
I'll just ask unanimous consent on the item.
No, there needs to be a motion.
Okay. Move to approve it, Chris. Move to approve it.
Move.
I understand. I think I know where she's going.
The first vote was to bring it back before the body, to immediately reconsider it. That passed. It's now before you, so it needs a motion to approve it and a vote on that.
Okay.
Okay.
Jennifer, seconded.
Okay.
Ask unanimous consent. Seeing no opposition, item is back in front of it. It's been approved.
Okay.
Now, Chris, you want to move for immediate reconsideration, and
No.
you're going to urge a no vote.
I think you
Jennifer.
just did that. You just reconsidered it.
So we're fine?
Yeah, we're done.
We're fine. And I'll
Great.
sign it tonight.
Thank you.
Okay. Now moving on, now that we're all confused. Item 14E is in front of us. Resolution Air 2010-160, a resolution of the Municipality of Anchorage, Alaska, accepting 3 State of Alaska Drinking Water Fund loan agreements in the aggregate amount of $9,835,000 from Anchorage Water and Wastewater Utility. There's an Assembly Memorandum, AM 305-2010, that comes with it. Anybody wishing to testify on this item, please come forward. And you've got 3 minutes. Please state your name clearly for the clerk and spell your last name. Hearing and saying no, the public hearing is closed. What's the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Any discussion from Assembly members? Yes, sir.
What, just, is there a rough order of magnitude of what sort of savings this accounts to? There's no fiscal note attached.
That's administration, sir. Administration?
Mr. Primo?
I had somebody query me about, why are we doing all this refinancing? And I assured them it was very significant financial savings. And typically we'd have a fiscal note attached to this, but I was just curious as to the order of magnitude of the savings.
Through the chair, Mr. Birch, I do not have that information in front of me, but if you could run $9.8 million the delta of 1.5%, which is the loan rate, versus 4.5%, 5%, we'd get the revenue bond market. That'd be your savings in the multi-millions.
Basically, the answer is it's very, very significant.
3% savings on $10 million over 20 years.
20 years. Great. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Good job.
Good work.
Any other comments from Assembly members? Seeing none, ask unanimous consent on this item from the body. Seeing no opposition, that item is approved. Madam Clerk, 14E. Next item in front of us is 14F. Resolution Air 2010-161, a resolution of Municipality of Anchorage, Alaska, accepting State of Alaska Clean Water Fund loan agreement for the Aspen Disinfection Study and Grade Project in the amount of $2,644,000.
Waive reading.
Anchorage Waste and Water. I ain't doing it. And then there's an AM 2006-210. Anybody wishing to testify, please come forward. State your name clearly for the record, please. Hearing and saying no in public hearings, close. What's the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Discussion from Assembly members. If not, please ask unanimous consent. Any opposition? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, please let the minutes reflect that item 14F was approved by the body unanimously. Next item in front of us is 14G, Resolution Air 2010-162. A resolution of the Municipality of Anchorage appropriating $700,000 from the MOA.
Waive reading.
For expert financial management and support services. Public hearing on this item is now open. Anybody Anybody wishing to testify, please come forward. State your name clearly for the clerk. Hearing and seeing none, public hearing on this item is closed. What's the wish of the body?
Second.
Discussion from Assembly members. Not seeing any, ask unanimous consent. Is there any opposition? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, let the records reflect that item 14G was approved by the body. Next item in front of us is item 14H, Resolution Air 2010-163. A resolution of the Municipality of Anchorage, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly appropriating $1,012,487 contribution approved in the 2010 general. Okay. This is the Eagle River Chugach Parks and Recreation Services Area Capital Improvement Project Fund. Anybody wishing to testify, please come forward. State your name clearly for the record, please. Hearing and seeing no one, public hearing this item is closed. What's the wish of the body?
Second.
Any discussion from Assembly members? Seeing no discussion? You what? Is there any opposition to approval? Ask unanimous consent. Seeing no opposition, that item is approved unanimously. It's item 14H. Item 14I, Resolution Air 2010-164, resolution of the Municipality of Anchorage appropriating $200,000 of program revenues.
Waive reading.
To the Heritage Land Bank Fund. This is for the Reeve Boulevard Site Remediation Assessment and Design Project. Anybody wishing to testify, please come forward. State your name clearly for the clerk. Hearing and seeing no one, public hearing is closed. What's the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Mr. Birch. Mr. Starr, sir.
Just for the administration, do we have any, at all, the level of exposure we have here? Are we talking millions of dollars in cleanup, or are we going to bankrupt HLB through, I guess, an action plan here? I like $200,000, but what's the scope of work? I mean, how long are they going to be on the job? 5 years?
Well, I'm hoping not 5 years. But the $200,000, what that will do is that will help us do the characterization, so we'll know exactly how much is there and what exactly we have to do and develop the plan to be able to go in and mitigate it. And the plan has to be approved, as you know, by DEC and EPA. We're estimating that it'll be around $700,000. That's our estimate without seeing the final classification and the actual plan.
Well, and the reason I brought that up, it does specify that they've got oversight of the remediation process, so that whoever's the contractee here is going to have to watch it beginning to end. Are they going to come back for a change order, do you reckon, or what do we expect? It's hard to say at this point.
It's hard to say, but we think we're pretty close to what the amount is, the estimate I just gave you.
Okay. Thanks.
Any other discussion from Assembly members? Seeing no one, ask unanimous consent on this item. Any opposition? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, let the minutes reflect that item was approved unanimously. Next item in front of us, item 14J, Resolution Air 2010-165, a resolution adopting substantial amendment number 3 of the Housing and Community Development 2010 Action Plan and approving an award of a contract in the amount of $1,775,000 to Volunteers of America National Services for the rehabilitation of the Birchwood Apartments. And there's a semi-memorandum that comes with it, AM 324-2010. Public hearing on this item is now open. Anybody wishing to testify, please come forward, state your name clearly for the record. Hearing and saying no in public hearing, this item is closed. What's the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Any discussion from Ms. members? Ms. Osiander.
I just want to thank the city for working with Volunteers of America, a great organization, and for having a project towards the north end of town. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other discussion from Assembly members? Ms. Drummond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I am supportive of this. However, I am disappointed that the folks were not able to get the Chelsea Inn project to work, because I've been getting a significant number of complaints about activities in that structure in my section of town, and I hope that somebody does something about it soon, because the police calls and the drug calls and complaints from the neighbors are just getting
I was talking to one of your constituents, ma'am, who has a restaurant right next to it.
That's right.
And they've poured their whole life savings in that restaurant, and they're seeing that slip away by the conditions of that particular institution.
I don't know what the solution is, but this would have been a good one. So I'm disappointed to see it not happen in Spenard, but I'm happy for Eagle River. I do hope that there is transportation available nearby, however.
Thank you, ma'am.
Let's talk, Harriet.
Any other discussion from Assembly members? Seeing none, ask unanimous consent. Any opposition? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, that item is approved by the body. We're now down to special orders. There's none I'm aware of. So we move down to unfinished agenda, and there's none. Audience participation. Anybody wishing to address the Assembly on any item, you've got 3 minutes. Please come and state your name clearly for the record, and we need you to spell your last name.
Hello, my name is Diane Witt, W-I-T-T. I'm here representing my company, Witt General Incorporated. We were the subcontractor for the Airport Heights Fire Training Facility. I think I was here about a month ago when we talked about Greg Jones, who's not here today, to be providing updates every 2 weeks. I feel it's my obligation to continue with that until it's resolved. To date, I have not received payment. We did have a meeting with the prime contractor where promises were made. None of them have been solidified in writing, which, to my dismay, is historically true for how they've conducted this entire project. So I came to update the Assembly and to provide myself for any questions they might have.
Thank you, ma'am. Questions from Assembly members? Okay, Mr. Honeman. Yes, sir.
Last week, I believe, last meeting we had, I think, was it the prime contractor who was here, and he addressed, and he had made some comment that there was some monies that was coming back or refunded or rebated back from one of the utilities or entities, perhaps nothing coming to you, a check or anything?
They had mailed us checks that were unspecific and did not detail what the work was that they were paying for. And what that has the effect of is confusing greatly any kind of claims or legal claim I might have. And as I expressed to them, if they wish us to blanket waive all claims, that the full amount that we've billed is what's due unless we come to an alternate agreement. I believe last week we had a meeting with them where we came to a partial agreement. I've billed roughly $340,000 plus another $30,000 in interest on the withheld monies, and they offered me $243,000 as an interim payment. Unfortunately, today when I contacted him, he expressed this as a final and complete settlement, and I've asked for clarification. He doesn't provide it, and apparently he'll be leaving on vacation next week, so another 2 weeks will go by. My fear is that this project will be completed, all the monies will be dispersed based on verbal promises instead of actual monies changing hands or settlement agreements signed. And I'm at a loss on what else to do except to keep appearing here in the hopes that someone will take an interest and actually audit this project.
Mr. Honeman? Anything else, sir? Mr. Gutierrez, sir.
Have you retained legal counsel?
Absolutely.
Okay, good.
But I was hoping that since we were an excellent contractor on that project, that the city would intervene and make sure that we were paid for our work, and that has not happened. I have not been in contact with anyone from the administration, although I had personal telephone conversations with Greg Jones last fall and email exchanges asking him about this specific issue, but they've been hesitant to say anything. And they've basically deferred to the prime contractor to having complete control over the monies on this project.
Thank you.
Ms. Wood, I see no further questions. Thank you for coming down again. Mr. Trainee may call you back up when he returns to the chair.
Okay, thank you.
We're under assembly comments. As per our chair's tradition, we'll go down the line. Ms. Drummond, any comments?
No comments, sir. Thank you.
Mr. Birch?
No comments.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Johnston? Mr. Starr? No. Mr. Hall? Mr. Honeman?
Be out of town the 10th through the 20th, but we will be in time for next assembly meeting.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Will you be here for the board meeting on the 10th?
Yes.
You will. Good. Very good. Mr. Gutierrez?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just very quickly, everyone knows we had a very tragic accident, an air crash in Anchorage last week, and every one of us up here loves this town, or we wouldn't be here. But it's real easy for me to see why I love this town so much. When you look at what happened during that, some of the photographs that were taken, that were in the newspaper, you see a group of citizens who didn't hesitate, who didn't think, who just got out of their cars and ran to help. I saw a photograph of people holding up a collapsed wing of this aircraft, presumably a wing full of fuel, and the plane was on fire. And anyone who would ask themselves why, the answer is simply because it's Anchorage, because it's Alaska. That's who we are. That's what we do. It was in a tragedy like that to be able to find something good, something heartening to take away from it. I know that the police department and the administration are trying to find those individuals who did it. I know that none of them did it for any kind of recognition or for a piece of paper from the assembly or the mayor. But all I really have to say is God bless every last one of them, because that was just an amazing thing to do. And it makes me very, very proud and very happy to live here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Gutierrez, and I think you're right. It points out the best of Anchorage. Ms. Osiander, ma'am? That's all the comments. I need a motion to adjourn.
Hold it. I want to speak. I thought you guys were like...
We're done.
Whoops, Mr. Chair, there is an audience participation
already. If you'd like to come and speak to us, come on down, sir. I went to audience participation earlier. That's the reason she testified.
Well, yeah, but I wasn't sure what you guys are doing. If you guys are still dinking around and trying to figure things out. Okay. I don't know if you guys have ever listened to...
we need your name for the...
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah. My name is Richard Langto, Lanctot.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys listen to 650 AM KNI station late in the evenings, but probably twice a year they have this guest on called David. His name is David Bloom, and he talks about, he's got a book out, it's called Alcohol Can Be a Gas, and he's got a website, alcoholcanbeagas.com. He's also got a video, and same name. And thing is what he talks about is taking stuff like grass clippings and stuff that's compostable type stuff and turning it into an alcohol, something that you guys could use as a fuel. Now, I don't know how many vehicles this city has, but I work for Solid Waste Services, and every day we take in God knows how much grass clippings and leaves and and branches and stuff like that could be turned into alcohol, okay, to use in our own vehicles. Now the genius about this is our customers are paying us to take the clippings. Now if we got sense enough to turn around and turn that into alcohol and maybe cut your fuel bills down considerably for our city vehicles, I just can't see why we don't do something like that. And that would do a number of things. One is we wouldn't have to put that stuff out in the landfill, okay? We could use it to help reduce the cost of our city, budget. And the thing is if you've got people that are willing to give you and pay you to take their stuff away, why don't we use it for something really productive for our city? It would make you guys shine probably throughout the world, because if you guys pull this one off, every city in America, I believe, every decent-sized city will probably look at this as, an example of what they could do with something like that. And I know we've got budget problems here, so I don't know how much you guys are open to this stuff, but I really wish that somebody here would take the ball and run with it, because I think we could be a real leader, on the national stage at least, when it comes to something like this. Any questions?
Ms. Drummond?
Yes, thank you, sir, for coming. I really appreciate hearing from somebody who actually has to handle all of this stuff. I know I'm frustrated because we did used to have a regional composting facility where something practical was done with that kind of waste. We do have, ML&P is going to be harnessing the landfill gas. I don't know where that project is in the works, but it seems to me that that would be a logical extension of that project, instead of just harvesting the landfill gas that's coming out from the already compacted landfill materials, to separate the compostable materials and provide an even swifter conversion. So thank you for the reminder. I trust the administration will take that into consideration.
Well, I would really like to see us, because they've already got a bunch of stuff out there already being processed or whatever that's, but to me, this is something we can do kind of like in a very near future. And this city takes in God knows how many tons of clippings and stuff like that every day, okay? And I believe we could reduce our gas bill for our vehicles. And I believe this is also can be used for diesel, if I'm not mistaken. We could cut our fuel bill in half in this city, I'm sure, And I really wish that somebody would take a look at it. I mean, I know they got that thing going on at the landfill and stuff like that, but I think this would be a better and smarter use for it.
Thank you.
Ms. Johnson?
Thank you.
I just, if you want to see this progress, if you could, just research how much raw material takes to make how much gas and the cost of making that gas. I'm sure, I know we've looked at this in various forms, but if you can come up with some new figures, or if through David Bloom's site, and if you want to email it to me, it'd be great. Also, Alaska Waste is composting, and a number of other, Evergreen, there's a number of composting facilities that are going on, and they're being successful. But I'd be interested if you can email me the cost and how much raw material for how much fuel, then we look into it.
Well, like I said, I work at Alaska Waste. I mean, not Alaska Waste. I mean, solid waste, and we don't compost any of that. That's going right to the landfill, and to me, that is such a huge waste.
Work with you if you want to see if you can get me some of the information.
Yeah, I'll see what I can do.
Any other questions from Assembly members?
Thank you.
Yes,
have a good night.
Motion was adjourned. Was there a second? Second. We're adjourned. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.